Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. Here with some return friends today. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've actually already been introduced to all three of my speakers today, and I'm just so excited to have them all back. But we're going to introduce ourselves really quickly to kind of give you the lay of the land of who you're listening to before we dig into today's topic, which is going to be around the earning gap and pay equity. So I'm excited to talk about this. But first, if you're new here, my name is Sarah Heeter. I am the host of this podcast, and I also founded and run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media.
Hello, I'm Erika Alexander. I am the financial wellness strategist of Abundant Outcomes, and I work with people to get out of their own ways when it comes to their finances.
I'm Hady Mendez. I'm a Latina speaker, an ERG coach, and I'm also an author. I consider my job to be empowering Latinas and women of color. And what else am I supposed to say? I'm a business owner. I have a book coming out this September. So if I sound a little bit confused, maybe that's why. But yeah, I'm excited to be back here with you, Sarah. I always enjoy the spaces you create.
And I'm Kirsten Ziegler. I'm an HR consultant and founder of KDZ HR Consulting. I work with female identifying business owners to help them build compliant and thriving teams.
Yay, welcome. And of course, as always with these discussions, everyone's bio and the links to connect with them is in the description or the show notes, and we'll talk about that again at the end. Today's big, brave question is, how can we close the earning gap and ensure true pay equity in entrepreneurship? Who would like to take it away?
Good question. I actually want to share a story of something that happened to me just yesterday that is related to this. So I consider myself to be a content creator, mostly I'm trying to promote my business. And so I create a lot of content that hopefully reaches the right audience, gets people sort of kicking tires and seeing if they think they could use my services, etc. And so this was a workshop that I attended that was the guest was a white man who was talking about how he's been leveraging content creation, particularly on LinkedIn, to monetize, to make money. And the long and the short of it is that he is making a lot of money on LinkedIn right now. That's the long and the short of the story. What I felt he kind of, as he was talking about how he just reaches out to people and he just pitches, and he's just like he just woke up one day and decided to pitch somebody, and like or like people randomly message him and was like, "Hey, you want to do this? I'll pay you to do this." Like he's getting all these like amazing opportunities. One of the things I think that he glossed over and that I wish we had spent more time talking about was access to like people and opportunities, because that hasn't been my experience. And it's not because I'm not knocking on doors or because I'm not out there promoting my work and promoting my services. And I haven't experienced what he experienced. And it's okay, like we're not in the same field, and that's understandable. It's not apples to apples. But I think just one thing that I noticed was he made it sound so easy, and I just haven't had that experience in my whole life. As a Latina woman, my whole life, nothing really has come that easy, and certainly not pitching myself. So I do pitch myself, and I have pitched myself to write in like publications and share my thought leadership and all that jazz, all the things. And I just haven't had that experience. So I feel like that is one thing that is getting in the way of pay equity. It's one thing that, oh, he also said something that I thought was really funny. He said that someone told him that he wasn't charging enough. So now he's charging like way more than he used to. And I couldn't help but chuckle on that one too, because that also has been a pain point for me. I have organizations reaching out to me all the time, telling me that they're going to give me exposure in return for my speaking, or they can give me $500 and basically an honorarium. And they're not really willing to pay me for my expertise. And so I don't think the field is a level playing field. And access is a big one as it relates to leveling that playing field. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. And I don't think he realized it. And I wouldn't blame him. Like, I guess I want to say for the record that no shade on him. The only shade I put on him is that he did not seem to be aware that that's not the experience of everybody walking around. We don't all have that same ease with which we just slip in and out of rooms and slip in and out of DMs. And he talked about how I don't know who he approached, some like really famous person. It was like, hey, you want to like endorse my book? And the guy was like, sure. And like he got endorsed by like this really famous person. And I'm like, yeah, that just doesn't happen to everyone. And I think that was the shade that I give. Like that's if I have any beef with him, it's not his success, it's just his lack of awareness that other people don't have that same experience.
I'm surprised that you actually thought he was going to be able to tell you anything that would be able to help you. Like you talk about, he didn't talk about, was he going to tell you that his father actually knew people who put him in these rooms, or he pledged some frat at some U of somewhere where he made connections? A lot of times, for me personally, not for everyone. When I hear people talk about their experiences, I'm thinking, well, yeah, have you looked at you? Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? I'm not going to have those experiences. I don't golf. I don't belong to a country club. Like, so I actually fault whoever didn't provide a more diverse panel, a diverse speakers to say, well, this is one way. These are some other ways that people have actually been able to gain some ground. For me personally, I never knew how much I should be charging. It actually took people to tell me, oh, this you should be charging more than this. Because I got into a field where I had no exposure, I had no mentors. I didn't know how much people charge to give presentations or to do workshops about financial wellness. And so I had to essentially rely on other people to kind of give me some insight into what my range should be based on the type of content I was delivering, the type of medium it was, the number of people who I would be delivering to. I got a little bit of input from a business coach. I got some input from a friend who, like Kirsten, works in HR and was asking me to develop some content for her organization. And I was telling her, I was like, well, you're my friend, whatever. She's like, nope, this isn't enough. I talked to my manager. My manager said you should be charging at least this. So it really kind of requires community. Even the guy who you referenced, Hady, someone in his community told him that he wasn't charging enough. And so what we have to do is probably reframe what we think of as community and kind of reach out more and just have organic conversations with people about offering their services. I remember one time talking to another solopreneur about what I should be offering. And she was like, well, what do other people who do what you do offer? I mean, how much do they charge? I'm like, I don't know. She said, call and ask. Never occurred to me that I could just call someone. I'd be like, oh, so you live here, you do this, and that they would just tell me what their rate was, and then how to decide how close or far away I should be based on my exposure, whatever it is that I'm doing differently. So it's really, I'm with you, Hady. It's, you kind of have to take a lot of risk, because I'm always, of course, so I think not recently, but there are always conversations about imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to women. And I think some of that feeds into how much we charge for our time. And so I think in the future, I'm going to let Chat GPT be my business coach and tell me how much I should be charging.
I have so many things to say related to all of the things you both were talking about, but Erika, the part about community and talking about it is so important, because I had a similar experience when I started out as a solopreneur. And like, I'm in HR, I know generally what salaries are. I was charging nothing. like based on my experience, my knowledge, and I had to have a coach tell me, like, what are you doing? You need to raise your rates. And I felt guilty about it. Like it wasn't just the imposter syndrome, but I also had a lot of emotion attached to it. Like I didn't want to, like, I want to serve small businesses. I want to help them, right? But then I also have to be able to make enough money to be able to support and serve them. So that took a while for me to reconcile with. And honestly, I did raise my rates, but I did it in steps because that was all I could emotionally handle.
That's funny.
But it is. But talking about it is so, so important. And it's whether you're a solopreneur, whether you work in a business, like there are so many laws being passed now around pay transparency, which are so important. But yeah, that sense of community and talking about it and getting information, it is so much easier now to get information on pay than it used to be, whether that's looking at job postings because it's mandatory in some states, like if you are looking to work as an employee at a company, or even if you're an employer and you're like, I don't know how much people make in these roles. There are some states that require that. Look at a job description, but also ChatGPT is a great resource for that. And you always have to use your own thinking and determination. Don't take everything ChatGPT says like as the final word, but it is a great resource.
I did get an opportunity recently that was non-traditional for me, and it kind of stumped me in terms of how much I should charge. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, this is uncharted territory. So I did go to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave me two numbers because it was two like scenario A, scenario B, and the customer asked for pricing for both. And I didn't trust I didn't trust the numbers ChatGPT gave me. I was like, nah, I don't think that's right. I think ChatGPT lowballed me basically. So I raised it a little bit more. And then I talked to a friend, and I will say that for me in the future, the friend that I'm gonna call, the caller friend, is gonna be a white guy. And because the white guy is always gonna tell me like, charge him like 3 times as much. Because I called another Latina and she's like, well, yeah, I think that number's okay. We're both like, okay, yeah, that sounds right. And so that wasn't good. So PS, let me tell you what ended up happening. And this is goes now back to the community part. The person who had asked me for the pricing for scenario A and B is someone that I know is a friend who's like, now this is like a business relationship, but it's someone that I also know I'm friendly with. And I said, I'm thinking these numbers, but I really don't want to undersell myself. So could you let me know if you think I'm not charging, if I'm not, I forget how I said it, but like basically help a sister out. And he said that first number is too low. Raise that number. So he told me, and he's the one that's paying me, but he told me, he's like, raise that number. And then I think the other number is okay. And then we ended up with that pricing. So I felt like because it was a trusted relationship, I could be a little bit more transparent and say, I don't want to like lowball myself. This is just something I've never done before, but I want to be paid fairly. Could you just check me on the numbers? And he was able to tell me to raise my price a little bit. So I was grateful for that. That was a good happy ending to that story.
I think that's awesome. And I want to say, in the spirit of community, I think that's something that we can all also do for people we hire. I feel like I kind of am known for that. Like when I hire like friends who are also network connections, I will regularly tell people like, cool, PS, your prices are too low. Like you should raise these prices. I do love to tell people that, especially if somebody sends you like, hey, here's a new pitch deck. Hey, will you review my website? Hey, I'm building this offer. Will you look it over for me as you are building those communities? Like I will say, I think you're pricing yourself too low, right? And often we'll talk through it. Like, how do you determine your pricing? And this is, I think, one of the things that's so difficult in entrepreneurship with the pay gap, especially because you're right, Kirsten, there are so many more resources and more through like legislation and policy available in kind of more corporate roles to see what do people get paid. But like, being an entrepreneurial service providing podcast producer, like there's no resource for that. Like even now, podcasting has become a lot more of a thing. So by now, if you were like to go on glassdoor.com or something, you could probably find salaries for a podcast producer. But at the time that I started my business, I still had to explain to people what a podcast was before I could sell the service. So I definitely didn't know other podcast producers I could ask, what do they charge? Like I didn't know. I had to like come up with it. And this is something that came up at a conference I was at last year where somebody asked a question about pricing. And she said she's struggling with not giving away too much for free because, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Kirsten, of feeling like when you know your ideal client and you know what you are providing is something that you just so much want them to have the benefit from. Like, I want to do this service. Then we think of service as like, I should be giving it away. And so somebody had asked a question and the person on stage did not give the answer I would have given. But what I kind of responded with my sort of perspective, and I've shared this once before on the podcast, but my sort of perspective that I wished I could have answered for her, but I was just also in the audience, is I think sometimes what we struggle with is the difference between the part that we do that's a human right and the part that we do that's providing a paid service, right? Like, and so I think for me personally, the way that looks, the way that shows up is like, I truly believe that your voice matters. I truly believe that especially underrepresented voices in your communities or your industries, your voice matters. And that is the part of what I do that's a human right. That's the part that's free content. That's the big brave business. That's the content creation. That's the stuff I'm giving away, right? I want to help people whose voices are underrepresented build their own platform and use their voice because I truly believe in that. But like, editing your podcast, putting it on the internet, providing like strategy, that's paid. Like that's a service, right? That I can and put a monetary price on. And so I think like that's kind of figuring out the difference between like, this is the part that should be free, this is the part that should be paid. Another thing that came up in my head listening to y'all talk is based on the conversation we had in last week's episode where we were talking about aging and entrepreneurship. And one of the things we talked about was for especially women who are over 50, not having mentors or role models who have come before us in entrepreneurship to be able to look to. So we have to take these old white dudes' advice and apply it to ourselves, right? Like, how do I make this relevant to me? How do I adapt this to my own experience, right? If those are who's available as like a mentor who came before me, of course, we can have peer mentors, but like our mentors for people who came before us are just limited. And I think one of the things that also came up that's interesting that I want to put out there, and I just want to let you guys go for it and hear what you have to say, is we also posed this question about why more diverse business owners, other than old white dudes, are not selling their businesses. And somebody just briefly touched on in that conversation, well, it's not an equal playing field anyway. Like, I mean, not only do we not feel like we don't know we can sell businesses as women and minority owned business owners, but also we don't have the same access to funding. We don't have the same access to mentorship. We don't. So to even build a business that's sellable, we don't have the same access. So in order to be able to level the true pay equity and earning gap, all of those things would it's not just more women should build businesses they can sell. It's also how do more women have access to and other marginalized identities have access to build businesses that are sellable. So now I sort of want to shut up and just let you all share your thoughts.
I never even thought about that until I went to a conference last fall, and there was an entire panel that was related to this basically. And there was someone there who had gone through the practice of selling their businesses, and now they provide that service to other business owners, mostly like female businesses, to help them get ready and do like the evaluation and plan for selling their business. On the panel also was someone who started a VC fund just for female businesses. And so there are these things I feel like starting, right? But we're just so behind, which is unfortunate and crazy, but it's also inspiring to start to hear and see these conversations. Like, I know it's never too late. It's unfortunate, but it's hopeful in a way. Sure.
I would say for me, I'm still trying to make my business a thriving business. I'm not even there yet. So I have not even thought about potentially selling it. And quite frankly, this is what I want to take me into retirement. So I don't know that I would. Like I'm content with having a if I to the degree that I have a thriving business and I'm just kind of doing my thing, I would be content with that. So that's not what I aspire to, at least not at this juncture. But Sarah, I heard you on a podcast recently where you said that's what your goal is you're looking to sell your business, which I thought is pretty cool. Like that's amazing. And I kind of went into my own business, building my own business, kicking and screaming. It happened after a layoff. So it wasn't even, it's not even something that I imagined for myself, put it that way. So to even be like, oh, and now I'm going to sell this business, like I don't know, none of this there wasn't really a plan for any of this. It's just sort of like happening. And one thing but I would say my most immediate goal is have a thriving business and a lot of leads on a consistent basis and being able to make a comfortable living. And I'm still not there. I'm still struggling. I'm still trying to get leads. I'm still trying to figure out, am I talking to the right like customer? I don't know if I'm reaching my people yet. I don't know if I'm putting the right offer in front of them. Like I feel that I am. And then I listen to like a marketing workshop or something. I'm like, do I think I am? But I'm really not. I don't even know. Like sometimes I think I'm crazy, but I'm hopeful and I'm definitely finding a lot of partners, like experts to help me. And that is exciting for me that I'm finding people to teach me. And by the way, I'm an over 50 person and everybody that I've hired is younger than me. Everybody. So I'm not going to the old, what is it, stale, pale, and I don't know, frail, whatever it is. I'm not going that route. Everybody's younger. Everybody's like fun, millennial, Gen X crew, and no shame for me. I go where the expertise is and where I can learn. And so, and personally, and I know that this is not part of this show, but personally, I've tried to hire as many women of color or women in general broadly, and then women of color to help me get my business going. That's the input that I've been getting. And even in my book project, every single person that has touched my book has been a woman so far, and I hope to keep it that way. And I had a funny conversation with my publisher the other day. They said, I noticed you don't have any men endorsing the book. And I was like, well, do we need a man? And she's like, girl, we don't need a man. No, we don't. The answer is no. It's a no. We do not need a man. So I'm gonna stick to the women thing. But I feel like to answer the question about how we reach pay equity, I think part of the answer to that is to continue to employ each other when we can. So like give each other business. And I think that deepens our expertise and helps us to have more experience. And hopefully that helps to build our portfolio, helps to make us more marketable, and helps us to raise our prices. And I love what you said about being honest with people and just saying, I really appreciate the price I got, but just so you know, you should and could be charging more for your services. I think that is such a kind thing and generous thing to offer someone because a lot of people don't even know.
Yeah, everything that has been stated has been spot on. I had been ingesting some information, some little clips about pay equity in Hollywood. And they said that's one of the ways they have increased pay equity in Hollywood is for the stars of movies or productions to talk amongst themselves and say, hey, this is what I'm getting paid. You should, or during the offer process, you should ask for this. Or sometimes in cases where an offer is made to one person who can't take the job because they have a competing priority, and it gets offered to someone else, they'll call that person and say, hey, they will offer me this, this, and this. You make sure you get at least that. I think that we have to get out of the mentality where we don't believe that there's enough for everyone, so that we don't want to have these discussions. Also, we need to not be afraid of data. I work as a data professional, and the nature of my business is having to show a lot of data to my clients to show them this is really a serious issue. This isn't anything about hoarding money and things of that nature. There are no more pensions. Social Security is going to be whatever it's going to be. We're not saving enough. We're not planning early enough. We really need to kind of tap into to learning about how what we do today or don't do today is going to pay dividends or not pay dividends 20 or 30 years down the road. So I'm always combing a lot of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the census, about where the wealth lies and how. And so last week during a presentation I did virtually, I was showing these are young men who are in college about not only the wealth disparity, but where the wealth is and how certain communities put a lot of their wealth into real estate and not so much in the stock market. Now, it's great to be able to have three or four homes and live in one and rent them out. But when the real estate market tanks, all of your assets go down. And if you have mortgages on those assets, someone may call and say, hey, we're getting a little nervous. We know you made those last 180 payments, but we're worried about the next 180 payments. So just being cognizant about the reality of where we are, because I talk to clients all the time and say, well, how you feel about your financial situation is one thing, and then there's the data. So being able to know when the emotion is a benefit, and then when we just kind of want to leave all the emotion outside and say, let's work with the facts. And when it comes to data and statistics, it's like, oh, well, these communities are making this amount of money doing these types of things. That should at least give us a solid framework of where we should start in terms of saying, okay, well, this is a consulting job. I'm going to charge this by the hour. This is this type of job. I'm going to charge this by the event or this type of thing. Because the idea is not to go into business to struggle more than I was struggling as an employee or to have to figure out the next economic downturn. The entire point of becoming a business person, other than offering something fantastic to the community that it needs, is to also be able to provide for yourself now and in the future. And we should never lose sight of that, because men never lose sight of that. And we need to make sure, and the real crux of this is whatever money women earn never just stays with the woman. We take care of children and nieces and nephews and parents, and we're sending money off to kids in college. So, and can we be honest about the fact that it just costs more to be a woman? Like, literally. Like, this isn't like, I even do this presentation, part of my presentation on the pink tax, where women's razors cost more than men's razors, and girls' diapers cost more than boys' diapers, and adult diapers for women cost more. It literally costs more. Haircuts, dry cleaning, go on and on and on. So we should never shrink when we talk about our rates. State your rate, don't waver from it. And if the person can't pay your rate, that's not your customer. Your customer is somewhere else. And we need to really kind of store that in our DNA and not make it a point of negotiation, because none of my bills are points of negotiation with the people who send them, not one. So I think we should keep that in mind.
I love that perspective so much, and what a value to have your kind of financial guidance expertise come into play here, because I think you really nailed so much on the head about the systemic side of the pay discrepancy. And I think there's like a lot of things that are coming up for me, so I'm trying really hard to like manage the freight train of my brain. But I think that you mentioned, of course, like the pink tax and it being more expensive from babyhood to be labeled female. But I think also adding in the extra costs of living for other marginalized groups as well, and to call that out in this conversation, like chronic illnesses, disabilities, of course, yes, race and gender, like these things, that how we're able to get access to healthcare, what kind of healthcare we need, how doctors treat us, what our access is to, all of those different elements of things. And so I think like systemically, yes, the costs of not being a cis heteronormative white dude, like just increase your cost of living and you're getting paid less. So that sucks and it's hard. And I think also, especially with the way political tides are turning in this country and in the world. The cost of bras alone is criminal. Erika put in the chat. I didn't even think about that. Yes. And also the like beauty industry in general, just capitalizing on women, right? And I think so like what I started to say with the changing tide of politics in this country is also discouraging community among us, right? So if they can turn us again, they can turn us against each other, if they can keep us from talking, if they can keep us from being in community with each other and sharing wisdom and sharing guidance and having transparency about things and supporting each other, that actually benefits them in continuing to keep us smaller and earning less and working off of our backs. And so I think that here we go, that gets like really into Sarah's like political carrying the flag into battle type of thing, and that's not for everyone, but that's okay. That is definitely, especially these days, what I bring to friendships. So but I think, you know, where I'm going with this is that the community piece that we talked about at the very beginning comes up here again, of how important it is for us to be talking to each other and how much we can really learn from each other. Because I think, Kirsten, you and I both had a similar experience where it took being introduced to somebody who said, hey, lots of women don't sell businesses. Did you know you could just build a business to sell? I was already running a business at the time, not like I am today, but I was growing it, and I had never thought about that either, Hady. Like, it was, for me, it was like I didn't think I'd be podcasting forever. I didn't know how it would grow or evolve. I didn't have a long-term plan in that way, and I just kind of figured when I was done I would stop and like pivot to something else. I don't know. And so the idea that I could build a business with the intent to sell and then could sell it and start another business and sell that and be a serial entrepreneur, like I could do, you mean I could? How? Like, what does that look like? And I think the more that we can give each other those light bulb moments of like, hey, raise your prices. Hey, here's something you didn't consider. Hey, here's the future outlook of that. Like, here's what that could look like, is exciting and important and just could change everything.
I'm going to make another statement about a couple of things. So the other part I didn't talk about is the fact that women tend to be caregivers to someone. Small children, sick spouse, parent. That costs extra money too, because caregivers tend to spend $10,000 of their own money in caring for someone. So definitely. And when I work with small business owners about their overall financial state, sometimes I work with them about their personal and business finances or just individually. I always ask them about various things being included in their rates, right? So I'm like, your rate is kind of low. Does that include a vacation day? Because you're going to need some time off. Does that include a doctor's visit? Does that include your business insurance? Because we just pick these numbers out of the sky. And I'm like, no, I will tell you, I can build a spreadsheet for anything. And I will build a spreadsheet for your rate. You give me your expenses, come over here. I know you're going to take a little nap while I just gleefully just beat on this keyboard, but it makes me warm and fuzzy to make a spreadsheet. And so I show them. I'm not just telling you that you're being too kind. I'm showing you that you're going to bankrupt yourself if you stay on this path, and that's not the goal. So we can always find a way to make the dollars make sense, and we should.
To that point about caregiving, that not just talking about being an entrepreneur, but think about women who have worked for other employers in that they're just doing a 9 to 5 in corporate America, and then some have to take gaps in their careers, right? And I know it happens to entrepreneurs too, but it is such a demerit on someone's resume. It's looked at as such a demerit to take a gap in your career, whether you need to care for a sick loved one, or maybe you've taken some time off to start a family. I know a lot of people, when I was in corporate HR, there were a lot of younger female employees who had to quit their jobs after having their first children because their salaries and the cost of daycare, it didn't pan out, right? Like they ended up, it was a wash for them. So it made more financial sense for them to stay at home. But then in a few years, they're trying to re-enter the workforce and they are not being paid as much as their peers. Something that I really try to coach in small businesses is there are still skill sets being used in these gaps in careers, right? So when you think about it, like what kind of multitasking, organization, proactivity, shuffling around responsibilities. How reliable is someone during those times, right? And so, like, you can't think of career gaps anymore. I know it's a dated thing, in my opinion, to think of career gaps as a red flag. And half the time, I don't even inquire as to why there are career gaps. That was then. What are you looking for now? What can you do now? And so I think that hopefully we're kind of like moving towards that with a lot of different areas of business, but that is something that's definitely a little more difficult for those career gaps. Something that I do think is helpful, like I know I mentioned pay transparency laws before, it's forcing businesses to put like salary ranges for all of their jobs that they have, for every single position they have, right? So it's forcing these businesses to sit down and say, okay, well, if I have to post this openly to the public, I have to make sure that, because now my internal people are going to see these ranges. So I have to make sure everybody's salaries are in line. So it's really forcing businesses to take a look at their pay practices and get everybody into a range, which I think is a fantastic thing. I absolutely love a pay transparency law. And businesses should love them too, because it's giving context to employees. It's having them be more transparent and honest. And also during the hiring process, for both someone looking for a job, for a candidate, and the employer, it makes the process easier if you already know I'm going to already just get candidates that are within that range. I don't have to waste my time. Same for the candidate. So, big believer in pay transparency. And I think we need to adopt it into our entrepreneur practices also.
Yeah. I was going to say, I recently attended another workshop. And in this workshop, it was a woman who was talking about, she's like I don't know, she's like a marketing specialist, guru person. She gets called into a lot of big stages to talk about what she does. And the context of the conversation was that once you become an authority in a particular subject, whether that's through some thought leadership, writing, either you're like writing a book or you like writing articles or you're on podcasts about it or whatever the case might be. But once you establish thought leadership, you're kind of, you can charge more. That was her thesis, is that you could and should be charging more when you are a recognized thought leader. And that's been her experience, that she's been able to charge more because of that. And I think, again, I think that's where the inequity comes in again, because it's like who you think of as a thought leader is a certain kind of person. And who you think of as an authority, again, is a certain type of person, or maybe not, to be said in a different way. Do I look like a thought leader to you or to the general population? I don't know. I don't always think so. I don't certainly get treated that way or talked to that way when I'm doing pitching a lot of the time. And so I think the whole corporate experience is relevant because it kind of spills into this too, where it's like these biases, you're putting people in boxes and you're saying, you don't really look like an expert to me. You don't look old enough, or you don't, I don't know if you really have the experience. You're not polished enough. I don't see the executive presence I look for. You don't talk the way I expect a thought leader to talk. So a lot of that is the same things when I was in corporate and I was the head of equality at a major tech company. Those were a lot of the things that were said about marginalized communities there and why people weren't getting promoted then. And there's a lot of parallels, I would say, similarities. It's not like just because you work for yourself doesn't mean that, because we still have customers and we still have the general public that's weighing in on how credible we are and what is our worth or what is our value. And I feel like certain communities are going to still be at a disadvantage, regardless of whether we're in a corporate space or not. And this notion of like being authentic and being yourself, and like, I want to wear sneakers with my suits, if I even wear a suit. And it's like, that's not me. I run my own business. I can wear whatever I want to wear. I'm not bound by these corporate policies that are like outdated and like, what's the point? Like, I remember I grew up where I had to wear a suit. I was a consultant. I had to wear stockings. I will never wear a stocking for as long as I live, in perpetuity till the day I die. If I got to wear stockings again, drag me somewhere and throw me in the river, I'm not doing it. So I remember the day that I was like, I'm not wearing stockings anymore. And I was still in corporate when I made that decision. But like now I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm ever going to wear heels again for as long as I live. I just don't think it's going to happen. And so even when I talk to my customers and I'm like, what's the dress code? And they're like, well, and I'm like, I what? Is sneakers okay? Because that's what I prefer to wear. Like, because the content of what I say is still going to be the same and I'm still going to know what I'm talking about, but I would be more comfortable in sneakers. And so anyway, I think a lot of those biases are still very present and we don't escape them just because we're running our own businesses, because the people that are judging us, I feel that whole thing is the mindset is still there about like what a professional expert, what does an expert look like? What does an expert sound like? All of that is still very much defined by the majority, not the underrepresented
Well,
people.
and I think especially if you're pitching corporate clients, because that's what I was thinking when you were talking is like about thought leadership and expertise, is that so aligns with what we think of as professionalism, right? Which is super white supremacist and male dominated. So that's definitely like a massive issue. But what's interesting, Hady, is that when you said, do I look like a thought leader? Like me as somebody who knows you and who's had multiple podcast conversations with you, my gut immediately like leapt up to be like, yes. But I think that's because I know you and I know your heart and your mind and your intentions and some of the wisdom that you have to share. And I think that goes back again to that community piece of when people know us, then they know what thought leadership we have to share. And I think that, again, like pitching corporate clients, that's going to be a totally different story. But these opportunities we can entrepreneurially create for each other. Like there's no question, if I had a stage to put people on, you are one of the first people that would come to my mind as someone that I would want there. And I think that comes from the connection that we've built through these kinds of thought leadership conversations. And if I can like promote my own work for a second, that's part of the value of doing a podcast, right? Is that you have the opportunity to establish yourself as a thought leader. And now I'm a white woman, but this is something that I came into starting my business is being told all the time how young I look. Now, I do think that over the like 6 years that I've been doing this, that I've aged a lot physically, but I don't wear makeup, which does not help. And I dress very casually, which does not help with like looking older. But I think that that's something that I got a lot on social media in the beginning when I would share my family, because I have 3 stepkids. They're all over 20. So when I would share a picture of like my family opening presents on Christmas morning, I would get DMs from people saying like, there's no way those are your kids. Like I would never have thought that. So people make assumptions about my age, which I felt like I would run into this as far as like, do I look like a thought leader? Well, not if you think I'm 21. Like, then no, what am I the thought leader of? Like sorority life? I mean, of course not. So I think that that was something that I was really concerned about in the beginning when I started my business, is like, how do I help people hear the expertise that I have to offer? Because I am really fucking good at what I do. So how do I help people see that or hear that? And what I started to tell myself is, well, I'm not doing corporate contracts. I'm doing like more personal support. And so if that's the case, then all I need is for someone to get on a call with me. And once we start talking, they're going to believe it, right? They're going to believe it. I really believe this about myself. And if they wouldn't even take a call with me, I don't need to work with them anyway. Like I get to say that because in entrepreneurship, I get to make that choice. And as I build a reputation and as I build a network, I think that that helps with like getting more opportunities. Once people have seen you on a stage, then they invite you to something, right? Like, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to also touch on the freight train of my brain was also thinking of the caretaking piece, which y'all were talking about as well. And I read this book, which I've talked about a couple of times on the podcast, called Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years. Now, this is kind of mind blowing in itself, right? To think of like 20,000 years of humanity, because we tend to think of it since like year 0. So like we're only in year 2000, what the heck? But of course, like if you had good history education, and that's a big if you're American, then hopefully humans existed for a long time before that. That's why they created a year 0. There were humans around to create it, right? But anyway, one of the things that really blew my mind in this book was this concept that men were more on the side of like innovation than women throughout all of human history, including like the most ancient of ancient human history, because women tend to be in more of the caretaking roles. So they had to have really efficient, really effective, really repetitive roles that kept them close to the people who needed taken care of, right? The most vulnerable of the population, and that could be interrupted. So if somebody needs something from you that you're taking care of, you could easily return to your task. They had to be really efficient because they had way too much multitasking that they were responsible for. We've had this forever, always throughout human history. Men, in the meantime, get to go fuck around and find out. So therefore, they can waste resources innovating and creating shit because nobody needs them. Like, so they can go off and literally fuck around and find out. So that's why they've been at the forefront of innovation from the beginning of humanity. And there's this book I have not read, but I love the title of, and I think it's related, which is Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner? And that alone, just the title, you're like, oh shit. Yeah, I mean, right. Like, not just women birthed men who create things, right? But women are running their lives. Like, let's just be honest. That is like what women, and again, this is a very gender binary discussion because that's what women's work the first 20,000 years. There isn't a gender discussion there beyond a gender binary, but that really, really resonated with me from an entrepreneurship standpoint of like, well, no wonder women are starting behind, or let's just even say non-cisgender heteronormative white men. This is why we're behind, because our role in human history, going all the way back to the beginning of human history, is that far behind as far as having access to innovation. That hasn't been our role, and our role still really hasn't changed.
And our role is slipping backwards if
yeah.
in certain, well, we don't know what the future holds, but it's not looking really good right now.
This makes sense why we're all so tired. It's in our bones, in our DNA.
No, I think that's true. Like Hady and I talked on our last episode together about the ancestral wisdom of resilience, which like shout out to that episode. Incredible. Please go back and listen to it. But if you haven't already, or if you just need a recap, but I think you're spot on, Kirsten, that's not just about us in our own lived experience. It's our parents, it's our grandparents, it's our great grandparents, it's our great great grandparents that has literally been passed down. And the more marginalized identities you have as a cross, what is the word that I'm looking for? Not cross-functional. That's like very corporate. Yes, thank you. Intersectional. For intersectional identities that you are carrying, even more so. That yes, that's passed down.
Yeah, I must say I'm still amazed at the number of women who work full time, who are married, who take care of children, and who still do all of the more domestic duties. I'm like, is that what the liberation was all about? Because I feel like you missed the point. It's so that you can do more stuff and still get paid the same amount of money and be exhausted. Wow. Well, I'm glad I read a different book because nothing about that sounds like freedom to me. Nothing. But it's very odd to see people living this way, and I'm thinking, burning your bra gets you this. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes, some days I think that we go after certain things, and I do understand, of course, what the women's liberation movement was about. But then at some point, I think that we sort of missed the point. It's like, okay, yeah, we can do all this stuff, but just because we can and we have access to it doesn't mean we should do it all. And in terms of liberation, we have to reframe our relationships with everybody. Right? You know, how much do you do for your children? Do you support them until they're 30? That doesn't sound liberating. Do you work 40 hours a week, spend a half hour in traffic, and then come home and cook and clean too, and split the bills in the okay, so now tell me, now what does because now I think that we have different definitions of liberation. I have to believe that, right? Because that doesn't necessarily sound liberating to me, but apparently it does to someone, because why else would you choose this, right? So I just think that as women, again, in terms of, because this is a conversation about labor, right? Not just about pay equity, but let's talk about the equity in the household. We have to get a better understanding of what true equity is for us, and then communicate that to everyone who isn't us. And that's really the only way we are always going to get, even in non-monetary ways, we still need to get our value out of our relationships, right? Business relationships and all the other relationships too, in my humble opinion.
Definitely. And it's not only at home too, that's in the workplace also. I remember working a bunch of years back at a tech startup, predominantly men at the company. I was one of two women, and it was always one of us that had to do like, oh, can you go take care of this extra job duty? It was always like, oh, can you organize this party? Can you take care of this admin task? And none of the other people that work there were asked to do any of that. So I agree completely. And it's not just about at home, it's also at work. Like, we need to know the job we're there to do, that we're qualified for. We need to be able to also set our own boundaries and advocate for ourselves too, right? Like, on the flip side, I've seen people over communicate, maybe over inflate their worth, right? So we need to be knowledgeable, right? And have facts in place about what that job is, what our worth is, and have backup. Like, backup information can go so far.
See, Kirsten is even supporting my love of data. She's talking about information. That's just really data. That's just really data with some columns and some titles and stuff like that. But yeah, you have to kind of do your homework to really know, okay, so what is the playing field and what is my role in this playing field? Hady, were you about to say something? You had a look on your face.
I'm just thinking that it's so unfair. It also reminds me of corporate, where it's not enough to be really good at your job. You also have to be really good at selling yourself and promoting yourself. And that's true in this case too. So it's like you have two jobs. You have the job of just being good at whatever the darn thing is that you're good at. But if you're not good at selling yourself and promoting yourself, you may not even get to get paid and be successful in the thing that you are actually good at. Like, you have to also, all of us have to be like this marketer too. And to whoever just said the thing, that sometimes people are really good self-promoters, even though they don't even have that great skills. But like, that seems to be, even like on a weighted basis, that seems to even be more important. If you're able to pitch yourself and make yourself sound smart and look good, then you might get the opportunity and beat out someone who actually is better at the thing. It's conceivable. And women, that begs the question around self-promotion and why women are not as good or not as likely to self-promote. And it has a lot to do with people don't like people who self-promote. So women don't like women who self-promote, and men don't like the women who self-promote either. There's data, a lot of data to support that, and it hasn't changed in like over 50 years. So, but that's a critical part of us being successful entrepreneurs. And so I think that also is part of the pay equity gap, like that accounts for it. And I think one of the ways to close it is by becoming better at self-promotion. So we got to be really good at the thing. We got to be really good at the thing we do. We have to charge like as much as possible at all times, and like take the heart out of the work. And the like, bendito, how sad, I want to help you. It's like, no time for that. And then we have to be like super woman in terms of really promoting ourselves, knowing that there's going to be people out there that are going to be better promoters that are not necessarily better at getting the work done or getting the job done. So that's a big hill to climb. Not that it's not possible. It's just so people, I think, to appreciate why it is hard to close this gap, why it's taking so long to close the gap. And we don't have necessarily willing participants to help us close the gap in every case either, and which we haven't really talked about. But like, I feel like there's some people that are perfectly okay with the system as it stands, and they're not in a hurry to fix a broken system. So that it also needs to be said and acknowledged.
That's a great point, Hady. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, or that they're even in denial that the system even is broken.
Correct.
Well, I actually worked on a contract one time, and just as a fluke, all of these all this information just happened to come to me. So I had a conversation with a manager who was telling me about, how much he hated laying people off and all this type of thing, right? And I'm thinking, well, I'm a contractor, so you can't really surprise me by a layoff. It's kind of the nature of the beast. And about how one time it was this guy who was really horrible at his job. And he just been there about 60 or 90 days. It was right around the holidays. And he had a family, so I couldn't lay him off. And then the following year, I watched him lay off a young single woman under the same circumstances. And I was like, to have witnessed this is amazing. And so to Hady's point, yes, for some reason, men are seen as people with responsibilities and families. We can't just pull out the rug from underneath them. And back to my point about women being caregivers. Well, if you pull the rug out from under us, multiple households might collapse and some kids might have to come home from college and not return. But to that point, for whatever reason, we seem to require less and be entitled to less, whereas other people, whatever they ask for, they deserve. And it's frustrating.
It is. It is. And to be told in situations like that, it's business, it's not personal. As somebody who was laid off by men, and in a small business situation where they knew me very well, they knew my situation very well. They knew that my partner was in grad school and working part-time. They knew we had 3 kids at home. So yeah, like it's easy to say it's business, it's not personal. But for me, it was completely personal. It was my entire personal. Like, are you kidding? And these were people who I had a relationship with. So it felt like, shouldn't it be a little personal? Which is, I think also, and I mean, this is a whole can of worms and we don't have time, unfortunately, today to get into, but I think this is so much of what we're doing here on Big Brave Business is like, not just how do we close the gap as in how do we compete in the world as it is, but how do we rewrite it to do business better? Like, how can we change it so that business actually works for us? We don't have to change who we are and how we keep up. They have to change and be part of our world. And how do we take control of that, right? And move the wealth to us so that that's possible, so that we're not in situations like Hady mentioned early on in the conversation of like struggling, right? Struggling to make it work. And so I think that's so much of the beautiful work that we're doing here in these conversations. And thank you all for being here with me and for joining me for another really incredible Big Brave conversation. And I loved it. And I love you all. And I could just keep talking about this all day, which is why I have a podcast about it. But I love to end all of these conversations with the same question. Oh, let me mention again one more time. If you want to connect with the beautiful people on this call, because of course you do, our information is all in the description of the episode, the show notes. So you can read about our bios and also like connect with us, our links there. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate all of you so very much. I have had just the best time recording podcasts today, which I feel like is always true when I have a Big Brave Business recording day. I think you're just amazing and I appreciate you so much. And to you listening, thank you so much for being here. The show wouldn't exist without, well, it would, but it'd be boring if nobody was on the other side. So like, thank you so much for joining us here too. And we'll see you next week.